You wake up in the dark. Not comfortable darkness. This darkness is wet. It smells like something died, and the floor beneath you is moving. The building is sinking into the swamp they built it on, the same swamp they created by filling a lake with garbage and dead animals 40 years ago. Welcome to 5 Points. 1855. 1 in 3 children born here won't see their 5th birthday. This is what life was actually like in America's most notorious slum. Quick thing, if these help you sleep, subscribing helps me keep making them. Drop where you're listening from in the comments. Always curious about that. Anyway, get comfortable. Adjust your pillows now, because once we start walking these streets, you won't want to move. The first thing that hits you isn't what you'd expect. It's not the cold, though that'll come. It's not even the fear, though that's there too, waiting in the back of your throat like something you can't quite swallow. No, the first thing is the smell. Imagine every bad smell you've ever encountered in your life. Rotten food, sewage, unwashed bodies, the sharp copper tang of blood. Now imagine all of those smells combined into one overwhelming wall of stench so thick you can almost see it hanging in the air. That's what hits you the moment you open your eyes in your tenement room on Mulberry Street. You're lying on a pile of rags in the corner, not a bed. Beds are for people who have more than $3 a month for rent. What you have is what everyone else has down here in the basement apartment. Rags, straw, if you're lucky, and the constant grinding awareness that the ceiling above you is only about 5 feet high, so you can never quite stand up straight. There's no window. Well, there is a window, technically, a tiny rectangle of glass so covered in grime that even on the brightest day it lets in about as much light as a candle 3 rooms away. Right now, before dawn, it's completely useless. You could be in a coffin for all the difference it makes. Let me tell you about the woman lying next to you. Her name is Margaret. She came here from County Cork 3 years ago, fleeing a famine that killed 1 million of her countrymen and women. She was 22 when she stepped off the boat at Castle Garden, full of hope about this land of opportunity everyone kept talking about. She's 25 now. She looks 40. The crossing took 46 days. 46 days in the hold of a ship called the Washington. They called these vessels coffin ships for a reason. 17 people died during that voyage, including Margaret's mother. They wrapped her body in the only blanket she had and slid her into the Atlantic, somewhere off the coast of Newfoundland. Margaret didn't even get to see where she went into the water. They wouldn't let her up on deck. When she arrived in New York, she had 14 cents in her pocket and a name written on a piece of paper. An address, really. A cousin of a neighbour from back home who'd supposedly made good in America. The address led her here, to 5 Points, to this basement room that she now shares with 11 other people. 11 other people in a room about 10 feet by 12 feet with one window that doesn't open and no toilet because there is no toilet, just a bucket in the corner that someone empties, sometimes, when they remember. Margaret works 14 hours a day sewing shirts for a garment manufacturer on Pearl Street. She gets paid 6 cents per shirt. On a good day, she can finish 8 shirts. On a bad day, when the light is poor, or her fingers are too cold, or she's too sick to focus, maybe 4. Minus the cost of her needle and thread, which she has to pay for herself. Minus the rent. Minus the handful of bread and bit of watered-down beer that passes for meals down here. She's saving up, or trying to. She has 42 cents hidden in a fold of her dress right now, and if nobody steals it, and if she doesn't get sick, and if the rent doesn't go up again, maybe by next summer she can move to a room with an actual window that opens. A room above ground level, a room where the air isn't quite so, well, the air. Let me explain something about the air in 5 Points, and specifically about the air in the basement apartments of the tenements built over what used to be Collect Pond. 40 years ago, this whole area was underwater, a beautiful freshwater lake actually. Native Americans had fished in it for generations. The Dutch used it as a water source when they first arrived. It was clear and clean and honestly rather lovely by all accounts. Then the city decided to let industries set up shop along its banks. Tanneries, slaughterhouses, a brewery. They dumped their waste directly into the water, naturally, because where else would you dump waste in the 1790s? Within a few decades, the pond was a festering soup of industrial chemicals, animal parts, and raw sewage. The city's solution was brilliantly simple. Fill it in, cover it over, pretend it never existed. They filled it with whatever garbage they could find. Construction debris, more animal waste, dead horses, dead dogs, dead people, according to some accounts, though nobody can prove that one way or another. They piled all this stuff into the former pond, levelled it off more or less, and started building houses on top of it. The houses started sinking almost immediately. See, buried garbage doesn't just sit there quietly forever. It decomposes. It releases gases, methane mostly. The ground shifts and settles and sometimes opens up entirely. Buildings that were level when they were constructed start leaning within a few years. Basements that were dry flood with a dark, foul-smelling water that seeps up from below. That's the water Margaret feels dampening the rags beneath her right now. That cold, wet seeping that never quite goes away, no matter how many times you pile more rags on top of it. It carries the smell of 40 years of rotting garbage mixed with the contributions of everyone who's lived above it since then. And she's one of the lucky ones, believe it or not. At least her ceiling hasn't collapsed yet. Last month, 3 blocks over on Baxter Street, an entire floor gave way, just went. The joists were rotted through from all that moisture seeping up from below, and one day they simply couldn't hold any more. 14 people fell 2 stories into the basement. 6 of them died. The others are still recovering, those who can. The building owner hasn't repaired anything. He just boarded up the hole and kept collecting rent from the floors that remain standing. Margaret shifts on her pile of rags and tries not to think about the creaking she hears above her, the family of 8 that lives on the floor directly overhead, their footsteps as they move around in the dark, the way the whole building seems to sway slightly when someone walks too heavily like a ship in rough water. Actually, that comparison isn't far off. There's a tenement a few blocks away that everyone calls the Ship. They say it's because boats used to dock there back when the water came this far inland, but the people who live there say it's because navigating that building is like trying to find your way around a maze of ladders and trapdoors and sudden drops, stairs that lead nowhere, hallways that end in walls, rooms you can only reach by climbing through other rooms. The whole neighbourhood is like that, honestly. 5 Points got its name from the intersection of 5 streets that come together in an irregular star pattern right in the heart of the district. Orange Street, which was already turning into Mulberry Street by this point. Cross Street, Anthony Street, Little Water Street, and the Mulberry Bend itself, twisting around like it's trying to avoid something. What it's trying to avoid, of course, is the swamp, the underground remains of Collect Pond that nobody managed to completely fill in or drain. Water still bubbles up through cracks in the pavement sometimes, basements flood without warning, whole streets turn to knee-deep mud when it rains. 5 Points. Paradise Square, they called the Central Plaza when they first built it. Paradise Square. You have to appreciate the dark humour of that one. Okay, Margaret is awake now, not because of her internal clock, though after 3 years of 14-hour work days, her body knows when it's time to get up. No, she's awake because of the rats. The rats in 5 Points are legendary, and I don't mean that as hyperbole. I mean that visitors from other cities, other countries even, wrote home about the rats of 5 Points the way people write home about the Eiffel Tower or the Grand Canyon. They're that remarkable. They're enormous, first of all, fed on garbage and human waste, and occasionally each other. Some of them grow as big as cats, bigger, and they're fearless in a way that suggests they understand exactly who's in charge in this neighbourhood. Hint, it's not the humans. The rat that just ran across Margaret's foot wasn't particularly large, maybe the size of her fist, but its presence reminds her that she needs to check her shoes before she puts them on. Last week, a woman on the 3rd floor put her foot into a shoe without checking and got bitten so badly she couldn't walk for 2 days. The wound is infected now. Everyone's waiting to see if she'll keep the foot. Margaret's shoes are clear. Small victory. She slides them on and begins the process of standing up, which in a room with a 5-foot ceiling means a kind of perpetual crouch. Her back aches constantly from this. It's been 3 years. She doesn't remember what it feels like to stand up straight indoors. Around her, the other 11 residents of the basement room are also stirring. The O'Brien family in the corner, father, mother, and 4 children, ranging from 12 years old down to an infant who cries constantly because it's hungry constantly because there's never quite enough food. The infant's crying is what actually woke Margaret, now that she thinks about it. On the other side of the room, the 3 German men who arrived together last year and work at a slaughterhouse down by the river. They speak little English and keep to themselves mostly, communicating with the Irish families through gestures and shared exhaustion. They leave earliest, well before dawn, because the slaughterhouse starts work at 4 in the morning. And near the door, or what passes for a door in this basement, a woman named Bridget, who claims to be Margaret's cousin's neighbour from back in Cork, but who Margaret has never actually verified, because how would you even do that? Bridget works nights. Nobody asks doing what. Nobody needs to ask. The bucket in the corner is full. It's been full for 2 days. Whoever was supposed to empty it has either forgotten, died, or simply given up. Margaret tries to breathe through her mouth as she edges past it toward the narrow stairs that lead up to ground level. The stairs are where it gets dangerous. 12 steps. 12 narrow, worn, half-rotted wooden steps between the basement and the street. No railing, no light. Just your hand against the damp wall and your faith that the wood hasn't given way since yesterday. Margaret has watched 2 people fall down these stairs in the past month. One broke her arm. The other broke her neck. She goes slowly, 1 step at a time, feeling with her foot before she puts her weight down. The wood creaks and groans beneath her but holds. This time. At the top of the stairs, a door that doesn't quite fit its frame. Margaret pushes through into the hallway of the tenement proper and her first breath of marginally fresher air in 12 hours. I say marginally because the hallway isn't exactly a breath of fresh country air. The sinks are out here, see? The common sinks that serve all 6 floors of this tenement, and the sinks are connected to a cesspool in the basement, a different basement than the one Margaret just crawled out of, theoretically. The cesspools have a tendency to connect with each other underground and with the remains of the old pond and with the sewers, and honestly nobody really knows what's connected to what down there anymore. What Margaret knows is that the smell coming from the sinks makes the smell of her basement room seem almost pleasant by comparison. She holds her breath and hurries past. The front door of the tenement opens onto Mulberry Street, and for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, Margaret pauses to look at the sky. It's still dark, but there's a thin line of pink starting to show between the rooftops, that rose-coloured ribbon that Jacob Riis would later call the heaven of these people, the only heaven they get to see from the narrow canyons of their alleys and courtyards. Margaret doesn't know who Jacob Riis is yet because he's only 6 years old in 1855, living in Denmark, decades away from his work documenting places like this. But she looks at that strip of pink sky with the same longing he'll later describe. Then she lowers her eyes to street level and reality reasserts itself. Mulberry Street at 5 in the morning is already coming alive. The garbage from yesterday hasn't been collected because it's never collected, just piled against buildings and in alleys to rot until someone eventually burns it or it gets trampled into the mud. Pigs wander freely, rooting through the refuse. The city banned keeping pigs above 86th Street years ago, but nobody enforces much of anything down here in 5 Points. Children are already out. Some of them are heading to work. Factories don't have minimum age requirements in 1855, and a 6-year-old can strip tobacco or sort rags as well as anyone. Others are street children, orphans or half-orphans, or children whose parents can't afford to feed them. They sleep wherever they can find shelter and survive however they can manage. Margaret recognises one of them, a boy of maybe 8 or 9 who sleeps in the doorway of the grocer's shop 2 buildings down. He's been there for as long as she's lived here. She doesn't know his name, nobody does, including possibly him. He just exists, part of the landscape of 5 Points like the pigs and the rats and the sinking buildings. She should give him something. She knows this. Her conscience tells her this, and the priest at Transfiguration Church on Mott Street certainly tells her this every Sunday in his booming voice about Christian charity and loving thy neighbour. But her 42 cents won't save this boy, won't even help him meaningfully, and without those 42 cents she'll never get out of that basement. She'll die in that basement of cholera or tuberculosis or a collapsing ceiling or any of the 100 other things that kill people in 5 Points. So she looks away, like everyone else does, and she keeps walking. Her workplace is 8 blocks away, on Pearl Street, where it curves toward the river. 8 blocks isn't far in modern terms, maybe a 10-minute walk on a clear sidewalk, but nothing is clear in 5 Points. The streets are rivers of mud after yesterday's rain, mixed with horse manure and human waste and God knows what else. The wooden sidewalks where they exist are broken and treacherous, and every block brings new hazards. Here's what you have to watch out for walking through 5 Points in 1855. First, the pigs. They're everywhere and they don't move for anybody. Second, the holes. The streets are full of them. Some are potholes, some are actual sinkholes where the ground has simply given way into the tunnels and cesspools below. Third, the people. Not all the people, obviously. Most people in 5 Points are just trying to survive, same as Margaret, but some people have discovered that survival is easier if you take what you need from others. The gangs are everywhere. Margaret knows better than to make eye contact with the young men lounging on the corner of Baxter Street. Their red shirts mark them as dead rabbits, one of the 2 major gangs fighting for control of 5 Points. The other gang, the Bowery Boys, wears different colours and comes from a different neighbourhood and hates the dead rabbits with a passion that makes no sense to Margaret, but that results in street battles with impressive regularity. Last summer, the 2 gangs fought for 2 full days. They used clubs and knives and paving stones and guns. When the militia finally restored order, 8 people were dead and at least 100 injured. Margaret hid in her basement room the whole time, listening to the screaming above her head, waiting for a stray bullet or a fleeing rioter to come crashing through her door. The dead rabbits on the corner let her pass without comment. It's too early for them to be actively looking for trouble, and besides, she has nothing worth stealing. She's visibly poor, visibly Irish, visibly one of them in some fundamental way, not worth the effort. She's past them now. 2 more blocks to go. The sky is brightening, that strip of pink spreading into orange, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell starts to ring. 5 o'clock. Time for good Christian souls to start their day of labour. Margaret walks faster. She has shirts to sew. But let me tell you about where she just walked past. That corner where the dead rabbits were lounging, right behind them, in an alley so narrow you have to turn sideways to enter it, there's a building that doesn't have a name anymore. It used to be called the Old Brewery when it was actually a brewery, back when Collect Pond was still a pond. Then it became a tenement, and then it became something else entirely. They tore it down 3 years ago, in 1852. The Methodist ladies raised money and bought the building and demolished it. Every last rotting timber and crumbling brick. They built a mission house in its place, clean, bright, full of hope for the redemption of 5 Points. But the people who live around here still remember the old brewery. Some of them were born there, some of them lost family there. All of them know the stories. A murder a night for 15 years, they say. Maybe that's an exaggeration, maybe not. The old brewery was a 5-story building divided into something like 75 rooms, though room is a generous term for the spaces people actually lived in, more like cells or animal pens. Places where you could fit one human being lying down if they didn't stretch out too much. 1,000 people lived there at its peak. 1,000 people in a building designed to brew beer, not house families. They slept in the old machinery rooms. They slept in the cellars. They slept in the hallways, which had names like Murderer's Alley and the Den of Thieves. Names that were not metaphorical. When they finally tore it down, they found bones in the walls. Human bones. Nobody knew how many bodies had been hidden there over the years. Nobody wanted to count. Margaret walked past that spot every day for 3 years when the old brewery was still standing. She never went inside. Some instinct told her that if she crossed that threshold, she might not come out again, not alive anyway. The mission house that replaced it is better, cleaner, brighter. The ladies who run it hand out bread sometimes, and there's a school for the children and a sewing workshop where women can earn fair wages. Margaret has thought about applying there. The wages are slightly better than what she makes now. But the mission house also requires you to attend religious services, Protestant services, and Margaret is Catholic, like most of the Irish in 5 Points, and the thought of sitting in a Protestant church while they try to convert her away from the faith her mother died holding on to, well, some things aren't worth even slightly better wages. Besides, the mission house can only employ so many women, and there are thousands of women in 5 Points who need work. Margaret has learned not to hope for things that probably won't happen. Hope is expensive in a neighbourhood like this. It costs energy she can't afford to waste. She's at the workshop now, Pearl Street, where the brick buildings look almost respectable from the outside. Inside, of course, it's a different story, but that's a story for another hour. Right now, Margaret needs to get to her station before the foreman docks her pay for being late. Right now, she needs to survive another day. She pushes open the door. The smell of machine oil and sweat hits her face. The sound of sewing machines already running, because some women have been here since midnight, sleeping next to their stations so they can work through the night and earn an extra few pennies. Margaret finds her machine, sits down, picks up the first shirt, begins to sew. Outside, the sun is rising over 5 Points. That thin strip of rose-coloured sky is spreading now, touching the tops of the tenements with something that might almost be called light. The pigs are rooting through the garbage. The children are heading off to their various destinations. The men in red shirts are lighting their first cigarettes of the day. And somewhere in the basement on Mulberry Street, that infant is still crying, still hungry, still alive for now. In 5 points in 1855, that's about the best you can hope for. Still alive. For now. The sewing machine is older than Margaret. It squeaks with every rotation of the wheel, a high-pitched complaint that joins the chorus of 40 other machines in this room, all of them squeaking at slightly different pitches, creating a sound like a flock of angry birds trapped indoors. Margaret's station is in the back corner, away from the windows. The windows are valuable real estate in a garment workshop. Natural light means you can see your stitches clearly. Clear stitches mean fewer mistakes. Fewer mistakes mean you don't get your pay docked for ruined shirts. The women who've been here longest have claimed the window seats. Margaret has been here 8 months. She'll probably be dead before she works her way up to a window. That's not pessimism, that's math. The average life expectancy in 5 points is somewhere around 30 years. Margaret is 25. She's already borrowed time. The shirt in her hands is cotton, mass-produced for sale in shops uptown where men with clean fingernails will pay $2 for something Margaret earns 6 cents to make. The markup is obscene when you think about it, so Margaret has learned not to think about it. Thinking leads to bitterness. Bitterness leads to distraction. Distraction leads to crooked stitches. Crooked stitches lead to docked pay. She focuses on the needle. In, out, in, out. The rhythm becomes automatic after a while. Your hands know what to do, even when your mind wanders. Her mind wanders to the boy in the doorway, the one she passed this morning, the one she's passed every morning for 3 years without ever learning his name. There are thousands of children like him in New York right now, maybe 30,000 depending on who's counting and what they count as a child. They sleep in doorways, in alleys, under bridges, in the gaps between buildings. They form packs for protection, little gangs of 8-year-olds who watch each other's backs because nobody else will. Some of them sell newspapers. You've probably seen pictures of them, those old photographs of boys in caps shouting headlines on street corners. Newsboys, they're called. Sounds almost charming when you say it fast. The reality is less charming. The boys buy papers wholesale early in the morning, usually around 4 or 5 o'clock. They pay about a half cent per paper. Then they spend the rest of the day trying to sell those papers for a penny each, keeping the difference. On a good day, a newsboy might clear 20 or 30 cents. On a bad day, when the headlines aren't interesting or the weather keeps people indoors, he might not sell anything at all, and he still owes for those papers he bought in the morning. The newspaper companies don't take returns. So, the boys learn to be creative with their headlines. A small fire becomes a massive conflagration. A minor political disagreement becomes senators nearly come to blows. Anything to catch a customer's attention for the half second it takes to make a sale. The girls have fewer options. Some of them sweep crosswalks for tips, running ahead of well-dressed pedestrians to clear a path through the mud and horse manure. Others sell matches or flowers or bits of ribbon. Others learn, much too young, that there are men who will pay for things that no child should have to sell. Margaret's needle catches on a seam and she has to stop, untangle the thread, start again. Her fingers are already aching. It's only been 2 hours. Outside the workshop, the city is fully awake now. She can hear it through the thin walls, cartwheels on cobblestones, vendors shouting, the general roar of 100,000 people crammed into a space meant for maybe 20,000. And underneath all of it, if you listen carefully, the sound of water. Water is everything in 5 points. Getting it, avoiding it, surviving it. The Croton Aqueduct opened 13 years ago, in 1842. It was supposed to solve New York's water problems forever. Clean water from upstate piped directly into the city, fountains and hydrants on every corner, no more relying on polluted wells or contaminated pumps. Uptown, it worked. The wealthy neighborhoods got their clean water, their indoor plumbing, their flush toilets. Down here in 5 Points, not so much. Oh, there are hydrants. There's one right in the middle of the alley behind Margaret's tenement, actually. A cast-iron pipe sticking up from the ground with a spout on top. Children gather around it every day, filling buckets and pails, splashing in the overflow when someone leaves it running too long. But the water only flows at certain hours, and when it does flow, everyone needs it at once. The line starts forming before dawn. By the time the hydrant actually turns on, there might be 50 people waiting, all of them holding containers of various sizes, all of them desperate to fill up before the flow stops. Arguments break out constantly. Someone cut in line, someone's taking too long, someone's bucket is too big. Last month a man was stabbed over a dispute about whose turn it was. He didn't die, but he lost the use of his left arm, over water, over whose bucket got filled first. Margaret hauls water twice a day when she can. Once in the morning before work, once in the evening after. The bucket weighs about 40 pounds when it's full. She carries it up 6 flights of stairs to the room where she stores it, a room she rents specifically for water storage, sharing the cost with 3 other women from her basement. The rent on that room is 50 cents a month, just for a place to keep water. When the hydrant isn't flowing, there are other options. Pumps scattered around the neighbourhood, drawing from wells that tap into the groundwater, the same groundwater that flows through the cesspools and the rotting remains of Collect Pond, the same groundwater that carries cholera and typhoid and a dozen other diseases that nobody has names for yet. People drink it anyway. What choice do they have? Margaret doesn't drink the pump water, not anymore, not since the summer of '49 when cholera swept through 5 Points and killed. Well, nobody knows exactly how many. Hundreds, certainly, maybe thousands. The bodies piled up faster than they could be buried. Mass graves in Potter's Field, unmarked and uncounted. Margaret survived that summer. Barely. She was sick for 3 weeks, sick enough that she made peace with God and said goodbye to everyone she knew. But she pulled through somehow. The woman who shared her sleeping space did not. Margaret woke up one morning next to a corpse and had to wait 6 hours for someone to come collect it. After that, she stopped drinking the pump water. She pays extra for water from the hydrant, hauled from upstate where the sources are clean. It costs more than she can really afford, but she's alive. The woman next to her is not. In, out, the needle keeps moving. The shirt is almost done. Another few minutes and she can start on the next one. Through the window she can't see from her corner station. The sun is climbing higher. It must be almost noon by now. Her stomach is growling. She brought a piece of bread with her this morning, wrapped in a rag and tucked into her pocket. She'll eat it during the 15-minute break they get at midday. 15 minutes to eat, use the privy, stretch her legs, then back to the machine until dark. Let me tell you about what's happening underneath Margaret's feet right now. 5 Points sits on top of a network of tunnels, sewers mostly, big brick-lined passages that were built to drain the streets and carry away waste. They connect to each other in ways that nobody fully mapped, branching and merging and sometimes dead-ending into underground chambers that might have been cisterns once, or basements, or something else entirely. The city uses these tunnels. The official city, I mean. Maintenance workers go down there occasionally to clear blockages or repair damage, but they don't go down at night. They don't go alone, and they definitely don't go into certain sections, the sections where the official maps show nothing but blank space, because other people use those tunnels too. They're called the swamp Angels, named for the swamp that 5 Points was built on top of. They're a gang, loosely organised, made up of thieves and muggers and people who've discovered that the tunnels offer the perfect escape route. Here's how it works. A swamp angel robs someone on the street, maybe picks a pocket, maybe something more violent. Before the victim can even cry out, the angel disappears. Not into an alley, not into a building, into a sewer grating, down into the darkness beneath the street where the police won't follow. The tunnels connect to basements all over 5 Points, to cellars with hidden trapdoors, to abandoned buildings with entrances nobody remembers. A man can drop into a sewer on Cross Street and emerge 10 minutes later in a tenement on Cherry Street, half a mile away. By the time the cops figure out what happened, he's long gone. They say the swamp angels have a whole city down there, chambers where they store their stolen goods, places where they sleep, safe from the police and the weather and everyone else who might want to find them. Some people say they've seen lights moving through the grates at night, flickering deep below street level. Margaret has never seen a swamp angel. She hopes she never does. The women in her building whisper about them sometimes, about people who went out at night and never came back, about screams from underground that stopped suddenly, about the things that live in the tunnels besides the thieves. Rats, certainly. The tunnels are full of rats, bigger than the ones on the surface, some say, fed on whatever washes down from above, and other things too. Dogs gone feral, pigs that fell through sinkholes and survived somehow, maybe people who went mad and never came back up. Margaret doesn't like to think about what's under her feet. She doesn't like to think about the fact that the floor of her basement room is only a few feet above those tunnels, that sometimes late at night she can hear sounds coming from below, scraping, shuffling. Once, what sounded like laughter. She tells herself it's just the building settling, the sinking ground shifting, nothing to worry about, nothing that can hurt her as long as she stays above ground and doesn't go out after dark. In, out, in, out. The shirt is finished. She sets it aside, picks up the next one. Her fingers know what to do. Meanwhile, about 6 blocks away, on a street that officially has a name but that everyone just calls Blind Man's Alley, something interesting is happening. The alley isn't wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. The buildings on either side lean toward each other, their upper floors almost touching, blocking out the sky so completely that it's twilight down there even at noon. The cobblestones are slick with something best not examined too closely. The smell is, well, it's an alley in 5 Points, you can imagine. But people live here. They live in the buildings that line this alley, in rooms so small and dark that the tenants have to feel their way around by touch. Most of the people who live here are blind. That's how the alley got its name. Some of them were born blind. Some of them went blind from disease or injury, or the simple accumulation of years in conditions that damage eyes as surely as they damage everything else. Some of them pretend to be blind because blind beggars make more money than sighted ones, and nobody checks too carefully. They're all tenants of the same landlord, an old man named Daniel Murphy who lives in a slightly better building a few streets over. Murphy made his fortune from this alley and the tenements around it. $400,000, he claims. $400,000 squeezed out of people who can't see where their rent money goes. The thing about Murphy is that he went blind too. Old age caught up with him a few years back, and now he can't see any better than the tenants he's been exploiting for decades. Some people call that justice. Some people call it irony. Murphy doesn't call it anything. He's too busy fighting the Board of Health, which has been trying to force him to make repairs. His argument, when he appeared before the board last year, was memorable. He talked about standing on the brink of the grave, blind and helpless. He talked about his will, already written, his monument already waiting for him in Calvary Cemetery. He worked up real tears, apparently, and then someone asked him to actually fix the buildings, and his tone changed entirely. "These people are not fit to live in a nice house," he said. "Let them go where they can." The board made him clean up the worst of the buildings anyway. The result was complicated. A lot of the blind tenants moved away after the clean-up. The alley lost something when it got slightly cleaner, some sense of community or shared misery that had held it together. New people moved in. Different people. The names stuck even as the character changed. The sound of tapping canes still echoes through that alley morning and evening. The gentle groping tap of the blind man's staff as he feels his way to the street. Some things don't change, no matter how many times the Board of Health sends inspectors. Back at the workshop, Margaret is on her 5th shirt. Her back is a solid wall of pain now. Her fingers have gone past aching into a kind of numb tingling that she knows will turn into cramps later tonight. Her eyes are watering from squinting at stitches in the dim light of her corner station. 9 more hours to go. She thinks about the room with the window, the room she's saving for. 42 cents isn't much, but it's 42 cents more than she had a month ago. Maybe by next summer, maybe. The woman at the station next to her coughs, a wet, rattling cough that sounds like something is loose inside her chest. She's been coughing like that for 2 weeks now. Margaret has started holding her breath when she walks past. Consumption, that's what they call it. The disease that eats you from the inside, that makes you cough up blood, that turns your lungs into something that can't hold air anymore. It spreads in places like this, crowded rooms with no ventilation, shared sleeping spaces, shared everything. Margaret watches the woman cough into her hand, then wipe her hand on her apron, then pick up the next shirt. The shirts will go to shops uptown. Men with clean fingernails will buy them. They'll never know that the stitches were sewn by someone who might be dying. In, out, in, out. Margaret doesn't think about it. She can't afford to think about it. She just keeps sewing. Outside, the afternoon is wearing on. The children who sell newspapers are shouting the evening headlines now, their voices carrying over the general noise of the street. Something about politics, something about a fire in Brooklyn, something about a murder, because there's always a murder. The newsboys work in territories, unofficial zones that they defend against other boys who might try to move in. The best territories are near the ferry landings, where commuters come and go in predictable waves. The worst are deep in 5 Points, where nobody has money for newspapers and the competition is just as fierce anyway. One of those boys selling papers on the corner near the workshop is maybe 10 years old. He's been at this corner since he was 7. Before that, he lived with his mother in a cellar on Orange Street. She died of something. He doesn't know what. One day she was there, and the next day she wasn't, and the landlord threw him out because he couldn't pay rent. He doesn't have a name, or rather, he has several names depending on who's asking. The other newsboys call him Mick. The cops call him that little thief. The women who sometimes give him scraps of food call him poor dear, or the boy, or nothing at all. He sleeps in a different place every night. Doorways when it's warm, under the loading dock behind the warehouse when it's cold, sometimes in the newsboy's lodging house on Fulton Street when he has the 6 cents for a bed. A man named Charles Brace runs that place. A minister who believes that children like Mick deserve better than they're getting. Brace has plans. Big plans. He wants to put children like Mick on trains, send them west to farm families who need workers, fresh air and honest labour and 3 meals a day. It sounds like heaven to Mick. The few times he's heard about it, he's thinking about signing up. But the trains leave from a station uptown, and uptown might as well be another country. The distance isn't far in miles, maybe 20 blocks, but it's a distance Mick has never travelled, through neighbourhoods where people like him get chased away by cops and shopkeepers, and anyone else who doesn't want raggedy children cluttering up their clean streets. So Mick stays in 5 Points, sells his papers, steals what he can when he can't sell enough, survives. Tonight he'll eat whatever he can scrounge. Tomorrow he'll wake up before dawn to buy his papers. The day after that will be the same, and the day after that, and the day after that, unless the consumption gets him, or the cholera, or one of the gangs decides he's in their way, or he falls into one of the sinkholes that open up without warning, or any of the 1,000 other things that kill children in 5 Points every day. He's 10 years old. He might live to see 20. Probably not. Mick knows every hiding spot within 5 blocks of his corner. The loose board in the fence behind the cooper's shop where he stashes the pennies he doesn't want to carry. The gap between 2 buildings on Baxter Street where he can disappear in seconds if a cop comes looking. The cellar entrance on Worth Street that everybody thinks is locked but isn't, where he goes when the rain is too heavy for sleeping outside. He knows which shopkeepers will chase him and which ones will pretend not to see him take a bruised apple or a stale roll. He knows which gang members will cuff him on the ear for being in their way and which ones will break his arm. He knows the sound of boots on cobblestones, whether they're walking casual or walking with purpose. These are the skills that keep him alive. Nobody taught him. He just learned. Like all the other children in 5 Points learn. The ones who survive long enough to learn anything at all. Right now, he's watching a woman come out of the garment workshop. Not Margaret. A different woman. Older. She's clutching her pay. Probably less than $1 for 12 hours of work. She looks exhausted in a way that goes deeper than tired. Mick knows better than to approach her. Working women don't buy papers, they barely have enough to eat, but he watches her anyway, because watching is how you learn things in 5 Points. You watch everything, you remember everything, and someday, maybe, you use what you've seen. The woman disappears around a corner. Mick goes back to shouting headlines. The evening rush is coming. Commuters heading home from the docks and warehouses. Men who might have a penny to spare for news of the world beyond these streets. The sun is starting to sink now, painting that strip of sky between the rooftops with orange and pink and purple. The colours Margaret loves. The colours she watches for every evening on her walk home. The only beautiful thing in her entire day. She has 4 more hours of sewing ahead of her, then the walk home in the dark, past the corners where the gangs gather, past the alleys where the swamp angels might be waiting, past the dripping hydrant where maybe she'll have time to fill her bucket if she's lucky. Then the basement room with its 11 other people, and its bucket in the corner, and its rats, and its damp, and its smell. Then a few hours of sleep on her pile of rags. Then up again before dawn to do it all over. That's life in 5 Points. That's what survival looks like in 1855. Margaret finishes another shirt, sets it aside, picks up the next one. In, out, 4 more hours. The woman next to her coughs again, longer this time, more ragged. Margaret doesn't look up, she just keeps sewing. Somewhere out there, Mick is selling his last few papers of the day. Somewhere out there, the swamp angels are waking up in their tunnels, getting ready for a night of work. Somewhere out there, blind men are tapping their way home through alleys named after their affliction, paying rent to a landlord who can no longer see the money he's counting. And Margaret's needle keeps moving. In, out, in, out. The rhythm of survival in a place that wants you dead. The shirt in her hands will be finished soon, then the next one, then the next, and somewhere, far away from the gaslight and the squeaking machines and the coughing and the smell, a man with clean fingernails will put on one of these shirts and never wonder about the hands that made it. That's 5 points. That's 1855. The strip of sky between the rooftops is turning purple now. Night is coming, and with night comes a different kind of danger. The bell rings at noon. 15 minutes, that's what they get. Margaret pushes back from her machine and her spine makes a sound like someone cracking their knuckles. Every vertebra announcing its displeasure. She's been hunched over that needle for 7 hours straight, and her body has opinions about it. The bread in her pocket has gone a bit stale since this morning. She pulls it out anyway, tears off a piece, chews slowly to make it last. Around her, 40 other women are doing variations of the same thing. Some have bread like Margaret, some have potatoes, cold and hard, from being cooked yesterday. One woman in the corner has nothing at all. She just sits there with her hands folded, staring at the wall, waiting for the 15 minutes to pass. Margaret recognises her. Ellen something. Ellen Connolly, maybe? She started here about a month ago. Young. Couldn't be more than 16 or 17. She had a husband when she arrived in New York, Margaret heard. Had being the key word. He worked on the docks, unloading ships. Something fell on him. A crate or a barrel or a hook swinging loose. Nobody's quite sure because nobody saw it happen, and the foreman who should have seen it happen claims he was looking the other way. No husband means no income, means no food, means Ellen sitting there with her hands folded, watching other people eat. Margaret tears her bread in half, walks over, drops one piece in Ellen's lap without a word, walks back to her station. She doesn't know why she did that. She can't afford to do that. That bread cost her 2 cents this morning, 2 cents she won't be able to replace until tomorrow's pay, but something about the way Ellen was sitting there, something about the emptiness in her face. Stupid. Stupid and sentimental, and exactly the kind of thing that gets you killed in 5 points. Margaret chews her remaining bread and tells herself she won't do it again. Ellen doesn't say thank you. She doesn't even look up. She just picks up the bread and eats it so fast she almost chokes, cramming it into her mouth like she's afraid someone will take it away. Maybe someone will. That's another thing Margaret has learned about this place. Nothing you have is really yours. Not your bread, not your money, not your sleeping space, not even your body sometimes. Everything can be taken. The only question is when. The woman with the cough is eating something that might be cheese. Hard to tell from here. It smells like cheese, or maybe that's just the general smell of the room, which combines machine oil, sweat, fabric dust, and whatever everyone brought for lunch into one unidentifiable odour. 9 minutes left. Margaret uses the privy. There's only one for all 40 women in the workshop, a wooden box over a hole in a closet near the back door. No lock on the door, no seat really, just 2 boards with a gap between them. The smell is indescribable. Margaret has learned to hold her breath and be quick. When she comes back, Ellen has finished the bread and is crying, silent tears running down her face while she stares at nothing. The other women pretend not to notice. That's the rule in places like this. You don't notice other people's pain unless you can do something about it. Nobody can do anything about anything. 5 minutes left. Margaret stretches her hands, opens and closes her fingers. They feel like claws. 8 more shirts today if she wants to make her usual 48 cents. 8 more shirts after the 7 she already did. Her fingers will be bleeding by the end, probably. They usually are. The bell rings again. Break's over. The afternoon is worse than the morning. It always is. The sun has heated the building, and the workshop on the 3rd floor catches all that warmth with nowhere for it to go. The windows don't open. Nothing opens. They're sealed shut, supposedly to keep out the street noise, actually to keep workers from looking outside and getting distracted. By 2 o'clock, the room is an oven. Women are sweating through their dresses. The fabric under Margaret's arms is soaked. The woman with the cough is coughing more now, deep rattling sounds that make Margaret's own chest hurt in sympathy. The foreman walks the floor, a thick-necked man named O'Reilly, who never seems to sweat no matter how hot it gets. He carries a little notebook where he marks down infractions. Talking earns you a mark, getting up without permission earns you a mark, making too many mistakes earns you a mark. 3 marks in 1 day and you're docked an hour's pay. 5 marks and you're fired. O'Reilly stops at Ellen's station, watches her sew for a long moment. Ellen's hands are shaking, probably from hunger, probably from grief, probably from the heat. Her stitches are crooked. "That's 2 shirts ruined today," O'Reilly says. His voice is flat. No anger, no sympathy, just accounting. "Another one, and it comes out of your pay." Ellen nods without looking up. Her hands shake worse. O'Reilly moves on. Margaret keeps her eyes on her own work. Nothing she can do. Nothing anyone can do. In, out, in, out. The needle doesn't care about the heat or the grief or the crooked stitches at the next station. The needle just does its job. Let me tell you about what Margaret can see if she cranes her neck just right and looks past the 3 women between her and the window. The tombs. That's what everyone calls the city prison, even though its official name is something longer and more dignified. The Halls of Justice and House of Detention, built in 1838 on the same unstable ground as everything else down here, started sinking almost immediately. Just like the tenements, they had to drive wooden piles down through the muck to try to stabilise it. Didn't work very well. The building lists slightly to one side now, like a drunk trying to stand up straight. It's an Egyptian-looking thing. Big stone blocks, columns that don't hold anything up. A design based on some ancient mausoleum that the architect saw in a book somewhere. The people who named it the Tombs were making a joke, probably. Or maybe they were just being accurate. People die in there all the time. Prisoners waiting for trial, crammed into cells that were designed for 1 person and hold 4 or 5. Prisoners convicted of crimes waiting for execution. Prisoners who got sick from the damp that seeps up through the foundation. Prisoners who got killed by other prisoners. Prisoners who killed themselves because anything was better than spending 1 more day in that place. Margaret has never been inside. She hopes she never will be, but she knows people who have. A woman from her tenement last year, arrested for stealing a loaf of bread. She was in the Tombs for 3 weeks waiting for her trial. When she came out, she didn't talk right anymore. Something about her eyes had changed. She moved away a few months later. Nobody knows where. The Tombs sits on the edge of 5 points like a warning. This is what happens. This is where you end up. This is the stone that waits at the end of every wrong turn, every desperate act, every moment when survival pushes you past the line that separates the poor from the criminal. Margaret looks at her crooked stitches, straightens them, looks away from the window. 6 more shirts to go. The afternoon crawls. Heat and monotony and the endless rhythm of the needle. Margaret's mind drifts. She thinks about Ireland, about the farm her family worked before everything went wrong. It wasn't their farm, of course. They were tenants, like everyone else, paid rent to a landlord they'd never met, a man who lived in London and cared about County Cork only as a line in his ledger book. But it was green there. She remembers that. Green in a way that New York never is, not even in the parks uptown that she's heard about but never seen. Green and soft and quiet, except for the wind and the sheep and the occasional cart on the road. Then the potatoes turned black. Then her father died. Then her brothers scattered to wherever brothers scatter when there's no food and no work and no future. Then her mother got sick on the coffin ship. Margaret is the only one left. the last twig of a family tree that stretched back who knows how many generations on that same patch of Irish soil, all of it gone now, all of it ending here, in a workshop in 5 Points, sewing shirts for men who will never know her name. She shakes her head. Stupid thoughts. Dangerous thoughts. The kind of thoughts that lead to tears, and tears lead to crooked stitches, and crooked stitches lead to O'Reilly and his notebook. In, out, 2 more shirts. The sun is lower now. She can tell by the way the light through the sealed windows has gone from white to gold. Evening coming, freedom coming, or what passes for freedom when you live in a basement with 11 other people. 1 more shirt. The bell rings. 7 o'clock. 12 hours done. Margaret stands up too fast and the room spins. She grabs the edge of her machine, waits for her vision to clear. Low blood, probably. Not enough food, not enough water, not enough anything. The pay line forms at the front of the room. O'Reilly at a table with a cash box doling out coins. Margaret's turn comes. He counts out 42 cents, 6 cents per shirt, 7 shirts completed. Wait, she did 8 this morning and 7 this afternoon. That's 15 shirts. Should be 90 cents. The 2 from this morning were irregular, O'Reilly says, not looking up. And your break ran a minute over. Margaret opens her mouth to argue, closes it. What's the point? O'Reilly will have some answer, some justification, some reason why she owes more than she earned. He always does. They all always do. 42 cents, exactly what she had saved. Now it's her whole day's earnings. She's broken even. No progress toward the room with the window. No progress toward anything. She puts the coins in her pocket and walks out. The street hits her like a wall. The heat inside was bad, but out here it's different. Thicker, wetter. The smell of a summer evening in 5 Points. Rotting garbage baking in the last of the sun. Horse manure steaming on the cobblestones. Human bodies packed too close together, sweating and unwashed. Margaret starts walking home. The route takes her past the tombs, close enough to see the faces of people going in and out. Lawyers in clean coats, cops in their uniforms, family members with desperate eyes, hoping for visiting hours, hoping their son or husband or brother is still alive in there. She looks away, keeps walking, past the corner where the dead rabbits hang out. Different men than this morning, but the same red shirts, the same lounging posture, the same casual menace. They don't notice her. She's nobody to them, just another Irish girl going home from work, past the alley where the swamp angels supposedly have an entrance to their tunnels. She doesn't look down that alley, doesn't want to see what might be looking back. Past the grocer's shop where Mick the newsboy sleeps. He's not in the doorway now. He's on his corner, still selling papers, his voice hoarse from shouting headlines all day. She doesn't know his name, probably never will. Past the hydrant where children are filling buckets in the evening rush. The line is 20 people deep. Margaret doesn't have time to wait. Doesn't have a bucket with her anyway. She'll have to get water later before she sleeps. Past the tenements that lean against each other like drunks holding each other up, past the basement windows that glow with candlelight, past the women sitting on stoops, watching the world go by because their rooms are too small and too hot to stay inside. Home. The word feels wrong in her mouth, even when she only thinks it. Home should be something else. Should be the green fields of Cork, should be the kitchen where her mother baked bread, should be anywhere but here. But here is where she lives, so here is home. She goes down the stairs to her basement room, 12 steps in the dark, one hand on the damp wall, feeling with her feet. The room is crowded when she arrives. Everyone's back from work except Bridget, who leaves when everyone else comes home. They pass each other on the stairs most nights, saying nothing, acknowledging nothing. The O'Brien family is eating, something in a pot over a small fire in the corner. The smoke has nowhere to go, so it fills the room, mixing with all the other smells until you can taste the air. The three German men are sitting against the wall, talking quietly in their own language. One of them nods at Margaret as she comes in. His name is Klaus, or maybe Kurt, something with a K. He's been kind to her a few times, shared food when she had none, didn't ask for anything in return, which surprised her. Margaret finds her spot, the pile of rags in the corner that she's claimed as hers, sits down, closes her eyes. Her whole body hurts. Her back, her hands, her eyes, her soul if she's being dramatic about it, which she is, because after a day like today, she's earned a little drama. The infant is crying again. It's always crying. Margaret doesn't know its name, doesn't know if it has a name. Infants in 5 points often don't get named right away. Parents wait to see if they'll survive before investing in something as permanent as a name. She should eat something. She knows this, but eating means getting up, means finding food, means spending money she doesn't have. The bread she brought this morning is gone. Half of it into her own stomach, half of it into Ellen's. Stupid, and sentimental. Her stomach growls. She ignores it. She's had worse nights than this. She'll have worse nights again. Klaus, or Kurt, or whatever his name is, walks over, sits down next to her, holds out something wrapped in a cloth. She can smell it before she sees it. Sausage, actual meat. "You eat," he says. His English is broken but understandable. "You too thin." Margaret wants to refuse. She should refuse. Taking food from a man creates obligations, creates expectations, creates situations that get complicated fast. But she's so hungry, and the sausage smells so good, and Klaus or Kurt's face is kind, genuinely kind, the first kindness she's seen since she gave Ellen that bread this morning. She takes the sausage. "Thank you," he nods, goes back to his spot against the wall. Doesn't say anything else, doesn't seem to expect anything else. Margaret eats slowly, making each bite last. The sausage is heavily spiced, German style, not what she grew up eating in Ireland. But it's food, real food, protein that her body hasn't had in days. She thinks about Klaus or Kurt while she eats, wonders what his story is, how he ended up here, what he left behind in Germany, whether he has a wife somewhere, children, a farm like the one her family lost. Everybody in 5 points has a story. That's one thing she's learned in 3 years. Nobody chooses to live like this. They wash up here like driftwood on a beach, carried by currents they couldn't control. Famine, war, bad luck, worse luck. The Irish came because their potatoes died and their landlords didn't care. The Germans came because their revolutions failed and their governments wanted them dead. The black families came because they had nowhere else to go in a city that didn't want them anywhere at all. They live on top of each other in rooms like this one. They share water and fire and air. They speak different languages and worship different gods, and sometimes they fight each other for scraps. But sometimes they share sausages with hungry neighbours. Sometimes kindness survives, even in places designed to kill it. Margaret finishes eating, wipes her hands on her dress, closes her eyes again. Outside, the city is still loud, always loud, carts and voices, and somewhere far off, what might be music from one of the dance halls on Paradise Square. Not Paradise anymore, of course, just a name, a bad joke told by people who've never set foot in this neighbourhood. The candle across the room gutters and almost goes out. Mrs. O'Brien curses and adjusts the wick. The flame steadies, the shadows dance. Margaret's breathing slows. Her body is shutting down whether she wants it to or not. Too tired to stay awake. Too worn out to worry about tomorrow. She'll need water before she sleeps. She'll need to check her shoes for rats. She'll need to do 100 small things that keep you alive in a place like this. But not yet. Not right this second. Right now, she can just stop. The infant stops crying. Mrs. O'Brien must have figured out what it wanted. The silence is startling after all the noise, like suddenly going deaf. Into that silence, Klaus or Kurt starts to hum, low and quiet. Some German song Margaret doesn't recognise. A lullaby, maybe. Something his mother sang to him once, in a different country, in a different life. The humming fills the basement room, mixes with the smoke and the smell and the darkness, creates something that might almost be peace if you squint at it right. Margaret lets herself drift. Tomorrow will be the same as today. She knows this. The machine and the needle, and O'Reilly, and his notebook, the heat, and the thirst, and the endless aching in her hands. But that's tomorrow. Right now, there's a lullaby and a full stomach and a pile of rags that's almost comfortable if you don't think about it too hard. Right now, she can rest. The candle flickers. The humming continues. The infant sleeps. And somewhere above them in the streets of 5 Points, night settles in like a predator finding a good spot to wait. Margaret sleeps, but 5 Points doesn't. The neighbourhood has a different heartbeat after dark, slower in some ways, faster in others. The honest workers go home, the dishonest ones come out, and in the spaces between, a whole other economy wakes up. Let's leave Margaret in her basement for a moment. Let her rest. She's earned it. But while she dreams whatever dreams come to people who sew shirts for 12 hours, the world above her keeps spinning. The gas lamps come on first, or some of them do. The city installed gas lighting on the main streets a few years back. These tall iron posts with glass globes on top that give off a yellowish glow. They're supposed to make the streets safer, discourage crime, let people see what's coming. In 5 Points, half the lamps are broken, smashed by kids throwing rocks, shot out by gangs who prefer the dark, stolen entirely, iron posts and all, melted down and sold for scrap. The lamplighter who's supposed to maintain them doesn't come down here anymore. Not after what happened to the last one. So the main streets have pools of light surrounded by pools of shadow, and the back alleys have no light at all, just darkness thick enough to touch. This is when the dance halls open. Almack's is the most famous, a big wooden building on Orange Street, 3 stories tall, with a fiddler on the first floor and a bar on the second, and rooms you can rent by the hour on the third. The music starts around 8 and doesn't stop until 3 or 4 in the morning. You can hear it from blocks away on a quiet night, which means you can hear it from maybe 1 block away on a normal night, because quiet nights don't happen in 5 Points. The thing about Almack's is that everybody's welcome. Irish, German, black, whatever else, doesn't matter. If you've got money for drinks and you're not actively stabbing anyone, you can come in. This is rare in New York. This is rare anywhere. Most places in the city won't serve black customers. Most places won't let Irish and Germans drink together. But Almack's doesn't care. Money is money. Dancing is dancing. So, you get these crowds on the dance floor that look like nothing else in America. A black man dancing with an Irish woman, a German sailor doing a jig he learned an hour ago, mixed groups at the tables, sharing whiskey, sharing stories, sharing whatever people share when they're drunk enough to forget about the rules outside. Charles Dickens came here once, the famous writer, 1842. He was touring America and someone told him he had to see 5 Points, had to see the worst neighbourhood in the New World. So he came down with a police escort and poked around and wrote about it later. He didn't like most of what he saw, called the tenements hideous, said the poverty made him sick, but he watched the dancing at Almack's and something in his description sounds almost like admiration, the energy of it, the skill of the dancers, the way joy could exist in a place that seemed designed to crush it. Dickens is long gone now, of course, back in England writing more books about orphans and workhouses and the deserving poor, but Almack's is still here, still playing music, still letting anybody in. Tonight, the crowd is smaller than usual. Too hot to dance, really. Too hot to do anything except sit near the open windows and hope for a breeze that never comes. But the fiddler plays anyway, a slow tune, something Irish and sad that makes the women cry into their drinks, and the men stare at the table like they're seeing somewhere else. One floor up, Bridget is working. Margaret's roommate, the one who leaves when everyone else comes home. This is where she goes. This is what she does. The room's on the 3rd floor of Almac's rent for 50 cents, and Bridget gets to keep half of whatever the customer pays her. She's been doing this for 2 years now, since she was 16. Before that, she worked in a garment factory like Margaret, but the factory closed, and the next one wasn't hiring, and the next one after that wanted workers who hadn't lost 2 fingers in a machine accident. Bridget lost her 2 fingers at 13. The left hand, the smallest finger, and the one next to it, caught in the gears of a spinning machine. The foreman wrapped a rag around the stumps and told her to keep working. She finished her shift, passed out on the way home, woke up in a charity hospital with her hand bandaged and no job to go back to. You don't see those 2 missing fingers unless you're looking for them. Bridget learned to hide them, to tuck her left hand behind her back, to keep it in shadow. Most of her customers never notice. They're not looking at her hands. She doesn't talk about what she does. Not to Margaret, not to anyone in the basement room. They all know, of course, everybody knows, but they don't talk about it because talking about it would mean acknowledging it, and acknowledging it would mean making judgments. And making judgments is a luxury none of them can afford. So Bridget leaves when they come home, and they don't ask where she's going. And in the morning, when she comes back, they don't ask where she's been. It's a conspiracy of silence that's also a conspiracy of kindness. Tonight, Bridget has 3 customers. Slow night. Normally, she'd have 5 or 6. But the heat keeps people home, keeps them from wanting to climb 3 flights of stairs just to sweat in a rented room. Her 3rd customer is a young man, can't be more than 20, nervous, probably his first time. Bridget is gentle with him. She's learned that gentleness costs her nothing and sometimes earns her tips. When he's done, he sits on the edge of the bed and doesn't leave, just sits there, looking at his shoes. "You all right?" Bridget asks. "Fine." He's not fine. His voice shakes. "You got somewhere to be?" "No." A pause. "I came to the city last month, looking for work. Haven't found any." Bridget sits up, pulls the sheet around herself. She knows what comes next. The confession, the life story, the desperate need to be seen as a person by the one person who just saw him at his most vulnerable. "What kind of work?" she asks, because she's learned that listening is also part of the job. "Anything. Dock work, factory work. I can read and write. I was a clerk back home." "Where's home?" "Vermont." So far away. Bridget has met people from Vermont before. They come to New York full of hope and leave full of nothing, or they don't leave at all. They end up in basements and dance halls and places worse than both. "There's a man on Cherry Street," she says. "Hires clerks sometimes for shipping companies. Ask for Mr. Brennan. Tell him Bridget sent you." The young man looks up. His eyes are wet. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Brennan's a hard man, but he pays fair." The young man stands, buttons his shirt, leaves money on the dresser, more than he owes. Bridget doesn't count it in front of him. That would be rude. After he's gone, she counts it. A whole $1, twice what she earned tonight from all 3 customers combined. The kindness of strangers. The desperation of lonely people. The strange economy of the 3rd floor of Almac's. She pockets the money and goes to find her next customer. Back down on the street, the night is getting livelier. The groggeries are open. dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scattered through 5 Points like mushrooms after rain. They're not fancy places. Some of them are just rooms in basements, a barrel of whiskey and a tin cup. No tables, no chairs, stand and drink and leave before the cops come. The cheapest whiskey costs 3 cents a glass. It's not really whiskey. It's grain alcohol mixed with water and coloured with burnt sugar to look like the real thing. Sometimes there's tobacco juice in it, or turpentine, or things that don't have names. People drink it anyway. People drink it because it makes the world go away for a few hours. The more expensive places have entertainment, a piano player banging out songs, a woman singing, card games in the back where you can lose a week's wages in an hour, fights that start over nothing and end with somebody bleeding on the floor. The police are out there somewhere. The municipal police, they're called now, reformed last year after a whole complicated mess where New York had 2 police forces fighting each other in the streets. Long story. Point is, there are cops now, technically, patrolling, supposedly. But they don't patrol 5 Points much, not at night. The ones who come down here are either very brave or very stupid or very corrupt. Usually the third one. A cop who takes bribes can make more money in 5 Points than he'd make in a year of honest work. A cop who doesn't take bribes doesn't stay a 5 Points cop for long. So crime goes on. Pickpockets work the crowds outside the dance halls. Thieves break into any building that looks like it might have something worth stealing. Gangs stake out territory and beat up anyone who wanders into the wrong block. The murders happen mostly late, after midnight, when people are drunk and angry and the darkness covers everything. Stabbings usually, or beatings that go too far. Occasionally a shooting, though guns are expensive and bullets cost money that could be spent on whiskey instead. Bodies turn up in the morning, in alleys, in doorways, floating in the water where Collect Pond used to be. The police take notes. Sometimes they arrest someone. Usually they don't. Murder in 5 Points is barely news. It happens too often to be remarkable. Back in the basement, Margaret is dreaming. She doesn't dream about Ireland anymore. She used to, those first months after she arrived. Dreams full of green and soft rain and her mother's voice. But those dreams faded as the new memories piled on top of the old ones. Now she dreams about New York, about the needle and the machine and the endless grey of tenement walls. Tonight, she dreams about water. She's standing at a pump, working the handle, but nothing comes out. Just air. She pumps harder, faster, and the handle breaks off in her hands. Around her, people are waiting with their buckets, dozens of them, hundreds. They're looking at her with the kind of anger that comes from desperation. "The water's gone," someone says. "She took it," someone else says. "She used it all up." The crowd moves toward her. Margaret tries to run, but her legs won't move. She looks down and sees that she's sinking into the ground. The same ground that swallowed Collect Pond. The same ground that makes the buildings lean. It's soft under her feet and getting softer, pulling her down inch by inch. She wakes up, gasping. The basement is dark. The candle burned out sometime while she slept. She can hear the breathing of 12 people in the blackness. The O'Briens, the German men, the woman whose name she never learned, the infant, mercifully quiet for once. Her heart is pounding, her mouth is dry. That's real, the dry mouth. That's not a dream. She needs water. Should have gotten water before she fell asleep. She lies still, waiting for her heart to slow. The dream fades like they always do, leaving only the feeling behind, the fear, the guilt, the sense that something is wrong and she's the one who caused it. Above her, through the ceiling, she can hear footsteps. The building's owner lives up there, a man named Callahan who charges too much rent and fixes nothing. He walks around at night sometimes, checking on his property, making sure no one's causing trouble. Or maybe he walks around because he can't sleep either. Maybe he has his own dreams about water and angry crowds and ground that swallows you whole. Margaret doubts it somehow. Callahan doesn't seem like a man who dreams. She should go back to sleep. Tomorrow starts early. Always does. But her body won't cooperate. Her mind keeps running, chasing thoughts that lead nowhere good. She thinks about Ellen, the young widow from the workshop, wonders if she made it through the day without another ruined shirt, wonders if she found food or if she went to bed hungry like so many others. She thinks about Mick, the newsboy with no name. No, wait, his name is Mick. She does know his name, sort of. Wonders where he's sleeping tonight. Probably a doorway somewhere. Probably cold, even though it's summer, because nights still get cold when you've got nothing between you and the stone. She thinks about Bridget. Doesn't want to think about Bridget, but thinks about her anyway. What she's doing right now. What she has to do to survive. The math that led her to that third floor at Almack's and keeps her there night after night. Margaret could make that same choice. She's thought about it. In the worst moments, when the hunger gets bad enough and the coins run out, she's thought about it. The money would be better. The hours would be shorter. She could even keep working at the factory during the day if she wanted. Double income, faster progress toward that room with the window. But something stops her. Pride, maybe, or fear, or the memory of her mother who worked herself to death on a coffin ship rather than compromise her dignity. Maybe it's stupid. Maybe dignity is a luxury, like judgment, that she can't afford. Or maybe it's not. Maybe dignity is the only thing she has left. The only thing they can't take from her. She doesn't know. She doesn't have to know tonight. Tonight she just has to breathe and wait for sleep to come back. Outside, somewhere not too far away, a woman screams. Margaret goes rigid, listens. The scream doesn't repeat, doesn't turn into anything else. Just a single scream, and then silence. Could be anything. A fight, a robbery, a drunk falling downstairs. Could be nothing at all. People scream in 5 points, and nobody asks why. Nobody investigates. Nobody wants to know. Margaret waits for the footsteps above her to stop, for Callahan to go see what happened. They don't stop. He doesn't go. The scream was too far away to be his problem. She lies still and stares at nothing, and waits for her heart to stop racing. The basement settles around her, the sounds of sleep, the smell of too many bodies in too small a space, the slight dampness that seeps through the walls no matter how hot the day was. This is her life. This is what she came 3,000 miles to find. A room underground, a job that breaks her hands, neighbours who speak 3 different languages and share one common condition, poverty so deep it has its own gravity. She should be grateful. She knows this. She survived the crossing when her mother didn't. She survived the cholera when thousands didn't. She has work, which millions would kill for. She has a place to sleep, which puts her ahead of the children in doorways and the families in alleys. Gratitude doesn't come, though. Not tonight. Tonight there's just exhaustion and thirst and the echo of that scream still ringing in her ears. Klaus or Kurt rolls over in his sleep, mutters something in German. Margaret wonders what he's dreaming about, whether his dreams are green like hers used to be or grey like hers are now. The hours pass, slowly at first, then faster as her body gives up and lets go. She sleeps again. This time, no dreams. Just darkness, soft and blank, pulling her down. Above her, the dance hall music fades. Almack's is closing. The fiddler packs up his instrument. The drunks stagger home or collapse where they fall. Bridget finishes her shift and starts walking back to the basement, her pocket heavy with that extra $1 from the nervous young man from Vermont. The street sweepers come out. An army of them, mostly immigrants, mostly working for pennies. They push the horse manure and the garbage and the things that don't have names into piles at the corners. In the morning, carts will come and haul it away, or most of it will. Some always remains. 5 Points is never really clean. It just gets less dirty for a few hours before the dirt returns. The sky begins to lighten. Not sunrise yet, but the promise of it. That grey that comes before the pink. Margaret doesn't see it, she's too far underground, but somewhere in her sleeping mind she knows it's coming. Another day, another chance to survive. The infant wakes up and starts to cry, and 5 Points starts all over again. Sunday, the only day Margaret doesn't work, the only day any of them don't work except for Bridget, who works every night regardless of what the calendar says. Sin doesn't take weekends off, neither does Bridget. Margaret wakes up later than usual. Not much later. Her body doesn't know how to sleep past 5 anymore, but the light coming through the tiny window is different, softer. Sunday light. The basement is quieter too. The O'Brien children aren't rushing to get ready for anything. The German men are still asleep, or at least still lying down. Even the infant seems to understand that today is different. It's making soft gurgling sounds instead of screaming. Margaret lies still for a moment, enjoys the rare luxury of not having to move immediately. Her hands don't hurt as much today. They had a whole night to recover, and they'll have a whole day to rest before she has to use them again. Small mercies, that's what her mother used to call moments like this. Small mercies scattered through the hard days like coins dropped on a road. You couldn't live on them, but you could be grateful when you found them. She gets up eventually, uses the bucket in the corner that serves as a toilet for all 13 of them, washes her face with the small amount of water she saved from yesterday, puts on her other dress, the one that's slightly less worn than the one she wore all week. Church, today. St. Patrick's Old Cathedral up on Mulberry Street. Not the fancy new one they're building uptown. The old one. The one the Irish have been going to since before Margaret was born. She walks up the basement stairs and into the morning. The air is different on Sundays. Still smells bad, of course. Still carries that 5 Points perfume of rot and waste and too many people. But there's less urgency in it. Fewer carts on the streets. Fewer people rushing somewhere. Even the rats seem calmer, like they know the rhythm of the week and have adjusted their expectations. Margaret walks north on Mulberry, past tenements she's passed 1,000 times, but today she actually looks at them, really looks. They're not all the same, these buildings. Some are older, the kind that used to be single-family homes before the landlords carved them up into a dozen apartments. You can tell those by the stairs that don't quite fit, by the doors that were cut into walls that were never meant to have doors. Others were built as tenements from the start, newer, uglier, designed from the ground up to cram as many paying bodies as possible into as little space as the law would allow, and sometimes less than the law would allow because the law doesn't check often and bribes are cheap. She passes a building that's leaning hard to the left. Has to be at least 15 degrees off vertical. People still live there. Landlord still collects rent. The whole thing could collapse tomorrow, and everybody knows it and nobody does anything about it, because what's the alternative? Sleeping in the street? She passes a group of children playing in an alley. Not a game she recognises. Something with sticks and a ball made of rags. They're barefoot, all of them. Clothes more patches than original fabric. Faces dirty in a way that suggests the dirt hasn't been challenged in weeks. One of the kids notices her looking, a girl, maybe 8 years old. She stares back at Margaret with eyes that are way too old for her face. No wave, no smile, just that flat stare that says she's seen enough already to know that strangers looking at you is rarely good news. Margaret keeps walking. The church appears ahead of her. St. Patrick's. Built back in the 18 teens when the Irish were already coming but not yet flooding. Before the famine. Before everything. It's a handsome building, stone walls, a tower that doesn't lean, windows made of actual glass, coloured glass in some places, reds and blues that catch the light and throw it across the pews in patterns that almost make you believe in something. The doors are open, people are streaming in. Margaret joins the stream. Inside, it's cool. That's the first thing she notices. The stone walls hold onto the night air, keep out the morning heat. After a week in the workshop oven, the coolness feels like a blessing, like maybe God is real after all, and this is his way of proving it. She finds a spot in a back pew, sits down, folds her hands. The church fills up around her. Families, mostly. Mothers in their best dresses, which aren't very good but are clearly the best they have. Fathers looking uncomfortable in collars that don't fit. Children squirming, already bored, already counting the minutes until they can go back outside and play. Margaret recognises some faces from her tenement, from the neighbourhood, people she's seen at the hydrant or the grocer or just walking the same streets she walks. They nod at each other, that small acknowledgement that passes for friendship when nobody has time for real friendship. The Mass begins. Latin words that Margaret doesn't understand but finds comforting anyway. The rhythms are the same as they were in Ireland, the same as they were when her mother brought her to church as a child. The priest's voice rises and falls in familiar patterns. She doesn't really listen. She's not here for the sermon. She's here for the hour of sitting still in a cool room surrounded by people who share her faith and her struggles. She's here for the small mercy of not being alone. The collection basket comes around. Margaret puts in a penny. She can't afford a penny, but she also can't afford to be seen putting in nothing. Pride again, that expensive luxury. After Mass, she stands outside the church with the other parishioners. This is when the real religion happens, her mother used to say. Not the Mass, the conversation after. Women cluster in groups, exchanging news. Who's sick? Who's pregnant? Who's looking for work? Who found work? Who lost work? The endless catalogue of survival. Margaret listens more than she talks. She learns that Mrs. Flannery on Orange Street has consumption, that the Donnelly boy got a job on the docks, that the youngest Murphy girl died last week, some kind of fever, nobody knows what, that there's a new landlord buying up buildings on Baxter Street, a man named Stanton, who's supposed to be even worse than the old one. Information is currency in 5 points. You trade it like anything else. Margaret files away the useful bits and discards the rest. After a while, the crowd breaks up, people heading home or wherever home is. Margaret doesn't go home, not yet. On Sundays, she walks. Let me tell you about Paradise Square. It's not far from the church, just a few blocks south and west to the heart of 5 Points, the actual heart, the place where the 5 streets come together to form the shape that gave the neighbourhood its name. Cross Street, Anthony Street, Little Water Street, Orange Street, Mulberry Street. They all meet at one point, more or less. The boundaries are fuzzy now, buildings eating into what used to be open space, but you can still see the general idea. 5 streets, 5 points, one neighbourhood. Paradise Square sits at the centre, a small open area maybe 100 feet across that serves as the closest thing 5 Points has to a public park. There's no grass, no trees, just packed dirt and cobblestones and the ghosts of the collect pond underneath. On Sundays, the square fills up. Vendors set up their carts around the edges, food sellers offering things that Margaret doesn't always recognise. The Germans have their sausages, the Irish have their potatoes and cabbage, the Italian families, the newer arrivals, have breads and cheeses that smell different from anything Margaret grew up with. One woman sells nothing but pickles, big barrels of them floating in brine, available for a penny each. Margaret has no idea how you make a living selling pickles, but apparently someone does. A man with a handcart offers old clothes piled high like a fabric mountain. Used shoes tumble off the edges, hats that have seen better decades. Margaret spots a dress that might fit her, might be nicer than anything she owns, but the man wants 50 cents and she doesn't have 50 cents. Not today anyway, maybe next Sunday, or the Sunday after that, or never. The dress will probably be gone by then. Someone else's 50 cents, someone else's luck. She buys a pickle because she's hungry, and a penny is all she can justify spending. Eats it while she walks around the square watching the people. It's a strange democracy here. The mixing that happens in 5 Points doesn't happen anywhere else in the city. Uptown, the Irish live in Irish neighbourhoods and the Germans live in German neighbourhoods, and nobody talks to anybody different. But down here, there's no room for that. Everybody's crammed too close together to maintain boundaries. So you get scenes like the one in front of her now, an Irish woman haggling with a German vendor, a group of black children playing tag with a group of Italian children, a Chinese man sitting on a crate smoking a pipe, watching everything with the patience of someone who's seen it all before. The Chinese are new, relatively, started showing up a few years ago, drifting over from the west coast or coming directly from Canton. They live on the east side of 5 Points near the docks, keep to themselves mostly, run laundries and groceries, get beaten up sometimes by gangs who don't like their presence. Margaret doesn't know what to make of them, doesn't know anything about China except that it's far away and the people who come from there eat rice instead of potatoes. She supposes they have their own reasons for being here, their own stories, their own versions of the coffin ships and the dead mothers. Everybody has a story. That's the one thing 5 Points teaches you. Every face you pass has a whole life behind it, a whole history of choices and disasters that led them to this square on this Sunday morning. You'll never know most of those stories. They're not yours to know, but they're there, and they matter, even if nobody ever writes them down. Margaret finishes her pickle, wipes her hands on her dress, keeps walking. There's a commotion at the north end of the square, a crowd gathering. She heads that way, curious. At the centre of the crowd is a street preacher, not Catholic, something Protestant. He's standing on a box, waving a Bible, shouting about sin and redemption and the fires of hell. His accent is American, pure American, the kind of voice that's been in this country for generations. Look around you, he's shouting. Look at the degradation, the filth. This is what happens when you let the foreigners in. This is what happens when you open your doors to the refuse of Europe. Margaret stops, listens, feels something cold settling in her stomach. The Irish bring their popery and their drunkenness. The Germans bring their socialism. The Negroes bring their crime. And what do we get in return? Disease, poverty, the moral collapse of our great city. People around her are reacting. Some are nodding. Americans, probably. Natives, they call themselves, as if the word means anything to people whose grandparents also came from somewhere else. Others are angry. An Irish man near Margaret is clenching his fists. A German woman is shaking her head, muttering in her own language. "Go back where you came from," the preacher shouts. "Go back and leave America to the Americans." The Irishman takes a step forward. His friends grab his arms, hold him back. Starting a fight with a preacher in Paradise Square on a Sunday morning is a good way to end up in the tombs. Margaret turns away. She's heard this before. Not this exact speech, but versions of it. The nativists have been getting louder in recent years, more organised. They have their own political party now. The know-nothings, people call them. They want to close the borders. Want to kick out everyone who wasn't born here. Want to make America American again, whatever that means. It won't work, she thinks. There are too many of us now, too many Irish and Germans and all the rest. We're here and we're not leaving. You can hate us all you want, but you can't make us disappear. But they can make our lives harder. They already do. The signs in shop windows. No Irish need apply. The jobs that go to native-born workers first. Always first. The landlords who charge more because they know we have nowhere else to go. Margaret walks away from the preacher, away from Paradise Square, into the maze of streets beyond. She has somewhere to be, someone to see. Mrs. Flannery, the woman with consumption, Margaret heard at church that she's taken a bad turn, doesn't have long. Margaret barely knows Mrs. Flannery, met her maybe twice, 3 times, but they're both from Cork, both took the coffin ships, both lost people on the crossing. In 5 points, that's enough to make you family. The Flannery tenement is on Orange Street, 3rd floor. Margaret climbs the stairs, past families crammed into rooms like hers, past children sitting on landings because there's nowhere else to sit. The building smells like cabbage and illness. Most buildings smell like cabbage and something. This one, it's illness. She finds the Flannery room, knocks. A girl opens the door, 12, maybe 13, eyes red from crying. This must be the daughter. What's her name? Mary. Margaret can't remember. "I've come to see your mother," Margaret says. The girl steps aside. The room is smaller than Margaret's basement. 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 window that looks out on a brick wall maybe 3 feet away, a crucifix on the wall, a candle burning on a crate that serves as a table. Mrs. Flannery is in the bed. What's left of her. She's shrunk since Margaret last saw her. The consumption has eaten away at her like a fire eating through paper. Her cheeks are hollow, her eyes are too big for her face, and the cough that sounds like something tearing. "Margaret," Mrs. Flannery says. Her voice is barely a whisper. "From Mulberry Street." "Yes, Ma'am." "Sit, please." Margaret sits in the only chair. The daughter hovers by the door, unsure what to do with herself. "Mary," Mrs. Flannery says, "go outside for a bit. Let me talk to Margaret." The girl nods, slips out. Her footsteps fade down the stairs. "She's a good girl," Mrs. Flannery says. "Too good for this place. She seems it. I won't see her grow up." This is said simply, without self-pity. Just a fact, like saying the sky is blue or the rent is due on Friday. The priest came yesterday, gave me last rites. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm tired, Margaret. So tired. The crossing took everything out of me, and I've been running on empty ever since. Margaret doesn't know what to say. What do you say to someone who's dying? What words are there for a moment like this? "When I go," Mrs. Flannery continues, "will you look after Mary? Just look in on her. Make sure she doesn't end up on the streets." "Of course." The nuns might take her. At the mission, they take in girls sometimes, train them for service. It's not a life, but it's better than the alternative. The alternative, Bridget's alternative, the 3rd floor at Almack's, Margaret understands without being told. "I'll make sure she gets to the mission," Margaret says. "I'll walk her there myself if I have to." Mrs. Flannery closes her eyes. For a long moment, Margaret thinks she's fallen asleep, or worse, but then her chest rises and falls, and Margaret breathes again too. "I wanted to go home," Mrs. Flannery says, eyes still closed. "Back to Cork. When I first got sick, I thought, maybe I can make it back. See the green again before I die. Stupid. Not stupid. Stupid. There's no money for a crossing, and even if there was, what's left to go back to? The farm is gone, the village is empty, everyone who survived went somewhere else. Ireland's a graveyard now. Margaret thinks about her own dreams, the green fields, the soft rain, the kitchen where her mother baked bread, all gone, all replaced by this. "It's not fair," she says. Woman, no. Mrs. Flannery opens her eyes, looks at Margaret with something that might be kindness or might just be exhaustion, but fair's got nothing to do with it, never did. They sit in silence for a while. The candle flickers. Somewhere outside, children are shouting. Life going on. Go, Mrs. Flannery says finally. You've got your own life to live. Don't waste it sitting with the dying. Margaret stands, takes Mrs. Flannery's hand. The skin is paper thin, bones like bird bones underneath. Thank you, Margaret says, for surviving the crossing, for making it here, for being from Cork. Mrs. Flannery smiles. It transforms her face just for a moment, makes her look like the woman she must have been before the hunger and the ship and the disease. Go with God, she says. Margaret leaves. On the street outside, Mary is sitting on the stoop, staring at nothing. Margaret sits down next to her. She's going to die, Mary says. Yes. Soon. Yes. Mary doesn't cry. She's past crying, or not yet at crying, somewhere in that numb space where grief hasn't fully landed yet. What happens to me? The mission, the nuns there, they'll take you in. I don't want to go to the mission. I know. They sit together in silence. Two women from Cork, one barely a woman at all, watching the Sunday traffic go by. My mother wanted me to be a teacher, Mary says. Back in Ireland, before everything. She said I was smart, said I could be somebody. You still can be. Mary looks at Margaret, that same old eyes look the children in the alley had. Nobody becomes anybody in 5 points, she says. We just survive until we don't. Margaret wants to argue, wants to say something hopeful, but she thinks about her own life, her own dreams that have shrunk to fit the shape of a basement room and a sewing machine, and she can't find the words. Come find me, she says instead. On Mulberry Street, the basement, when, after, come find me. Mary nods, doesn't say anything else. Margaret leaves her there on the stoop and walks home. The afternoon is fading by the time she reaches her building. The Sunday stillness is giving way to the Sunday evening bustle, people coming back from wherever they went, children being called in from the streets. The smell of cooking from windows. She goes down the stairs to her basement. 12 steps in the dark. The room is fuller now. Everyone's back. The O'Briens are eating. Klaus or Kurt is reading something, a book or maybe a letter from home. Bridget is in her corner getting ready for another night's work. Margaret finds her spot, sits down, closes her eyes. She thinks about Mrs. Flannery dying in that room on Orange Street, about Mary sitting on the stoop with her old young eyes, about the preacher in Paradise Square shouting about foreigners and filth, about the children in the alley playing games with sticks and rags. She thinks about all the stories she doesn't know, all the lives being lived in the rooms around her, above her, throughout 5 points, each one full of details she'll never learn. Tomorrow she'll go back to the workshop, back to the needle and the machine and O'Reilly's notebook, back to the heat and the thirst and the endless shirts, but that's tomorrow. Tonight there's just this, the basement, the breathing of strangers who've become something like family. The last light of a Sunday fading somewhere above. Small mercies. Margaret takes them where she can find them. 3 days later, Mrs. Flannery dies. Margaret hears about it at the workshop. Word travels fast in 5 points. Someone's cousin knows someone's neighbour who lives on Orange Street. By the time the lunch bell rings, half the women in the room know that the Flannery woman is gone. Margaret doesn't cry. She barely knew Mrs. Flannery, but something heavy settles in her chest anyway. A weight that has nothing to do with grief and everything to do with inevitability. Another one gone, another story ended, another space in the world that will close up like water filling a hole. She thinks about Mary, sitting on that stoop with her old young eyes, waiting for the thing she knew was coming. After work, Margaret doesn't go home. She goes to Orange Street instead. The Flannery room is crowded when she arrives. This is how it works. When someone dies in 5 Points, the neighbours come, not because they were close necessarily, but because death requires witnesses, requires acknowledgement, requires people standing around saying the things people say when there's nothing useful to say. Mrs. Flannery is still in the bed. They've cleaned her up, whoever was here first, washed her face, combed her hair, folded her hands on her chest with a rosary threaded through the fingers. She looks smaller in death than she did in life, shrunken, like something essential has leaked out and left just the shell behind. Mary is in the corner, not crying, not doing anything, just standing there with her back against the wall, watching strangers fill up her home. Margaret makes her way through the crowd, touches Mary's arm. "Have you eaten?" Mary shakes her head. "Come on." Margaret leads her out of the room, down the stairs, into the street. The evening air is thick and warm, but it's better than the stuffiness inside, better than the smell of too many bodies and the one body that matters. There's a vendor on the corner selling meat pies. Margaret buys 2, hands one to Mary. "Eat." Mary eats, mechanically, like she's forgotten what food is for and is just going through the motions because someone told her to. "What happens now?" she asks between bites. "The wake, tonight and tomorrow. Then they'll come for her." "Who?" "The city, the dead cart." Mary stops eating. "She wanted to be buried in Cork." "I know. She can't be buried in Cork." "No." "Where will they take her?" Margaret hesitates. There's no good answer to this question. There's only the true answer. Hart Island, Potter's Field. It's where they bury people who can't afford a grave. A pauper's grave. Yes, Mary looks at the half-eaten pie in her hand, sets it down on a step, doesn't seem hungry anymore. She was somebody, Mary says, back in Ireland, before everything. She was the school teacher. Everyone respected her, and now she's going to be buried in a pit with strangers. She's not in her body anymore, Mary. She's somewhere else, somewhere better. The body is just what's left behind. Margaret doesn't know if she believes this. The nuns taught it to her. The priests repeat it. But standing here on Orange Street with a 13-year-old orphan, the words feel hollow, like coins that have been handled so much they've lost their shine. Mary doesn't respond, just stares at the pie she's not eating. "The wake will help," Margaret says. "It's for us, not for her. It helps us say goodbye. I already said goodbye in my head weeks ago when she first got bad. Then come anyway, for the others. They need to see you there." Mary nods, picks up the pie, takes another bite. Still mechanical, but at least she's eating. They go back inside. The wake lasts 2 days. This is tradition. Back in Ireland, it would be longer. 3 days, sometimes 4. Time for relatives to travel from far villages, for old friends to make the journey, for the whole community to come and pay respects. In 5 Points, 2 days is all anyone can afford. People have to work. Landlords don't care that your mother died. Rent is still due on Friday. But for those 2 days, something almost beautiful happens. The room fills with people Margaret doesn't recognise. Old women who knew Mrs. Flannery from the crossing, men who worked with her husband before he died of cholera in 49, children from the building brought by their parents to learn what death looks like before they have to face it themselves. Someone brings whiskey, someone else brings bread. A woman Margaret has never seen before sets up in the corner and starts keening, that high wailing sound that's supposed to help the soul find its way to heaven. The sound makes Margaret's skin prickle. Her mother used to keen like that at funerals in Cork when Margaret was small. Stories get told. That's the other purpose of the wake, to remember, to say out loud who this person was, what they did, why they mattered. She taught me to read, one man says. Back in Skibbereen, I was 12 and thick as a post, and she never gave up on me. She saved my daughter's life, a woman adds. During the crossing, when the fever hit, she stayed up all night with her, cooling her forehead with wet rags. She made the best soda bread in County Cork, someone else offers. Light as air, never got the recipe, God rest her. Mary listens to all of it. Doesn't speak, but something in her face changes as the stories pile up, like she's seeing her mother from new angles, like she's realising that the woman in the bed was more than just her mother, was a whole person with a whole life that Mary only knew part of. Margaret stays for most of the first night, leaves around midnight to get a few hours of sleep before work. Returns after the workshop closes, stays again until she can't keep her eyes open. The second night is quieter, fewer visitors. The whiskey is gone. The keening woman has moved on to another wake somewhere else in the neighbourhood. Death is a busy trade in 5 Points. Margaret sits with Mary in the corner. They don't talk much, don't need to. Sometimes just being there is enough. Near dawn, a priest comes, Father Brennan from St. Patrick's. He says some prayers in Latin, sprinkles holy water on the body, makes the sign of the cross. She was a good woman, he tells Mary. She's with God now. Mary nods, doesn't say what she's thinking. Margaret can guess what it is. If God is so good, why did he take my mother? Why did he bring us all this way just to die in a room that smells like cabbage? The priest leaves. The sun comes up. The second day of the wake is over. And then the cart comes. You hear it before you see it. The wheels creaking on the cobblestones, the horse's hooves, slow and steady. The driver doesn't hurry. Death isn't in a rush. The dead cart serves all of 5 Points, comes around every day, sometimes twice a day in summer when the heat makes bodies turn fast. It's just a wagon, really. Open in the back. Nothing fancy. The city doesn't spend money on the poor, living or dead. 2 men climb the stairs to the Flannery room. They're not gentle, but they're not rough either. Professional. They've done this 1,000 times. They wrap Mrs. Flannery in a sheet, carry her down, load her onto the cart with the other bodies already there. 3 others today. An old man Margaret doesn't recognise. A young woman who might have been pretty once. A child. God. A child who can't be more than 5 or 6. Mary watches from the doorway. Her face is blank, empty. Whatever she's feeling, she's pushed it down so deep that nothing shows on the surface. The cart pulls away, heads toward the East River, where a boat waits to take the bodies to Hart Island, Potter's Field. The place where the nameless and the penniless end up, buried in long trenches, stacked like cordwood. No markers, no stones, nothing to say who they were or why they mattered. Mrs. Flannery wanted to be buried in Cork. She'll be buried in a mass grave on an island she never saw, surrounded by strangers she never met. This is how it ends. This is how it always ends in 5 Points. Margaret takes Mary's hand. Come on, we have somewhere to go. The mission house is on Worth Street, just north of 5 Points, a brick building that looks cleaner than anything else in the neighbourhood. Scrubbed steps, windows with actual curtains, a wooden sign by the door that says 5 Points House of Industry in neat painted letters. Margaret has walked past this building 100 times, never went inside, never had a reason to, until now. The woman who answers the door is not what Margaret expected. She's young, maybe 25, well dressed in a plain kind of way. Her hair is pinned up neatly, her hands are clean. She looks like she's never missed a meal in her life. "Can I help you?" Her accent is American. Uptown American. The kind of voice that comes from parlours and drawing rooms. "My name is Margaret Callahan. This is Mary Flannery. Her mother just died. She has no one else." The woman's face softens. "Please, come in." Inside, the mission house is another world. The floors are swept, the walls are whitewashed. There's a smell of soap and fresh bread that makes Margaret's stomach clench with sudden hunger. A hallway stretches ahead of them, doors on both sides. From somewhere deeper in the building, Margaret can hear children's voices, singing maybe, or reciting something. Lessons. "I'm Miss Hartwell," the woman says. "I'm one of the matrons here. We take in girls who have nowhere else to go. We feed them, clothe them, teach them to read and write and sew. When they're old enough, we find them positions. Service usually, in good homes uptown." Mary is looking around with wide eyes, taking it in. The cleanliness, the order, the impossible normalcy of it all. "How much does it cost?" Margaret asks. "Nothing. We're funded by charitable donations. The girls work, of course, help with cooking and cleaning, but we don't charge fees. Nothing. Free room and board, free education, a path to a job that doesn't involve a needle in a sweatshop or the third floor at Olmax." "Why?" Margaret asks. She can't help it. In 5 points, nothing is free. Everything has a price. Miss Hartwell smiles. It's a real smile, not the fake kind that landlords and foremen use. Because everyone deserves a chance, because these girls didn't choose to be born poor, because Christ told us to care for the least of these. Margaret doesn't know what to say to that. She's not used to kindness that doesn't